So I spend a lot of my time when I'm not doing organizing work and taking care of business out in the woods and on the rivers and different places in the wild country. And what I've really enjoyed spending a lot of time doing the last few years is foraging. It's chanterelle season right now. I'm gonna pop this down here on the ground while I clean this. It's chanterelle season around here. This is the golden chanterelle. Got a good little basket of them here going. And, you know, I do this for many reasons. One, because I enjoy it. It's a great way to spend time out in the beautiful forest. I mean, it's a gorgeous day here. Late November, 2/3 of the way through November. And the sun is out. It froze last night, so pretty cold day. But beautiful day to be out here. This, being outside like this, it really puts you in touch with the natural world in a different way. And it changes your relationship to the land pretty profoundly. You know, my friend Derek Jensen has often said, you know, people will behave differently when they get their food and the water from the land versus if they get their food from the grocery store and their water from the tap. And I think that there's an incredible amount of truth behind this. I think in general, we will defend the systems that we rely on for our life. We will defend the source of life. And ultimately, you know, even if your food comes from the grocery store, your water from the tap, you are dependent upon the natural world. Everything comes from Mother Earth. But there's a disconnect. It's built into that system, right? That disconnect is profitable. It allows the population to be controlled. And that's been the modus operandi of civilization for thousands of years. Control the food supply and you control the people. And that's not compatible with wild humans. It's not compatible with people who have access to land. And because if you have access to land, ultimately, you have access to food. You have access to water. You have access to shelter. You have access to all the necessities of life. Again, everything comes from the land, ultimately. So, by civilization, by separating people from the land, makes us dependent upon it. It makes it inevitable that we are forced to go along with the ruling class. We're forced to do what they want because we don't have any other choice. We gotta survive. So I do this. I go out and I gather wild food for many reasons, like I said. One, because it's fun. It's beautiful out here. I'm having a great time. You know, this is the antithesis to a couple beautiful little chanterelles right here. This is the antithesis of, you know, what most of us are forced to be doing this year with our time, which is sitting around our houses, sitting on Zoom, you know, not seeing friends, not seeing family, doing the most sort of anti-human thing you can imagine. And that's staring at a screen all the time. And you know, the other reasons I do this are, you know, two, this is some of the best food you can get. I mean, you buy these suckers at the store, which you can do, and you're paying, you know, between probably $12 and $25 a pound for these chanterelles. This is the work of about half an hour tromping around out here. Got a pound or two there and more coming. I mean, they're popping up everywhere right now. There's a couple more right here. So this is not only the most delicious food, it's the most nutritious food. I mean, wild foods have a huge advantage when it comes to nutrition over cultivated foods. And that's true across the board, whether you're talking about wild meats, wild fish, you know, wild mushrooms, wild vegetables, berries, you see a huge advantage in terms of the nutrient density and the health of these foods. And, and people wonder why, when we're sitting around eating, factory farmed animals and, wheat and soy grown in a monoculture with fossil fuel fertilizer as far as the eye can see and sprayed with Roundup every day, people wonder why, we have these epidemics of, heart disease and cancer and all of these different health issues. It's no surprise that we have these issues when you look at what people eat and how they eat. Being out here is not only do you get the healthy food, but you get the, as the Japanese say, the forest bathing, right? I mean, this is where I'm at, and there's a creek down there. The sun is rising over here, breathing in all the aerosolized compounds coming out of these trees, the salal, Oregon grape, the mosses, all the lichens. This is incredibly healthy stuff, and that's not just, I'm not talking woo-woo. I mean, this is verified by science. A lot of these things have antimicrobial properties, antiviral properties, and then, you see the data again, looking at the Japanese forest bathing, that just says stress levels plummet when people spend time in the forest or in the trees or out in nature. So, I mean, the gathering itself is part of the meal before you even start eating. And, the final and sort of more directly political reason that I do this is because it helps build independence. It helps separate a person from the system, capitalism, that's destroying the planet. It helps you get free, It helps you be less dependent upon the system. You find garbage out here. So, when you are dependent upon the system, it is much harder for you to contemplate, serious acts of resistance, because that could cut off your own supply of food, your own supply of medicine, your own source of life. I don't pretend that, I have the skills to completely sustain myself off the land. I don't. And also there's the reality that the land is impoverished. The main food source around here traditionally was salmon, and they're mostly gone, right? The vast majority of the salmon are gone. So, I'm not saying that I can support myself off this land, but the more independence I get, the more psychologically free I get, and the more that, cultivates a resistance mindset that, it facilitates me thinking in ways that wouldn't even be possible, I think, were I completely dependent upon the system, right? And it helps me transfer my allegiance from the industrial system to the natural world. I mean, this is where my food comes from. This is where my water comes from. This is where, my clothing comes from. This is where everything that I rely upon, that we all rely upon, ultimately comes from, is here. And we got to recognize that, and we got to let that seep in, not just sort of intellectually, but actually into our bones, And I think eating wild foods, spending time out in nature, these things help facilitate that process, right? When you eat a wild meal, when you eat that and that incredibly delicious food hits your mouth, right? And you taste these wild tastes that you haven't experienced before, and your body suddenly feels so good from the nutrient density of these foods. And you're happy, and you're with friends, you've been outside, you've been foraging, having a good time. That starts to sink down to a deeper level, right? And in this era, when we need serious political resistance, when we need organized resistance movements, we need any source of courage we can get, any source of strength we can get. And this is one of the sources for me, is and has always been spending time out in places like this. And increasingly over the last 5 or 10 years, getting my food from these places. And then the final reason, which I'll mention as well, is that when you're out on the land, you get directly connected to places. And suddenly when, logging is proposed in a place like this, I mean, this isn't any protected forest I'm in right here. This is quote unquote working forest. I believe this is BLM land or Forest Service land. And, there are clear cuts all around here. And when you start getting your food from a place like this, you start to have direct investment in the health of that land, right? And all of a sudden, it's not just, oh, there's another clear cut. There they go again. All of a sudden, it's, hell no, they're not going to clear cut my mushroom gathering place. They're not going to clear cut my hunting place. They're not going to clear cut, in the watershed of that stream where I get my fish. You have a direct relationship with that place, and you're accountable at that point. There's an accountability because that land has given to you again and again and again, right? And when the time comes, it's time to give back. It's time to reciprocate in some way. So I know a lot of people in my circle, my community are into these things, but many people aren't as well. Many all are living in cities and urban areas. It's hard to get out. I didn't used to have a car. It's hard to get out to these areas in many cases. But, I recommend trying to do it, even if the only nature nearby is a park. You can find wild edible plants. You can find medicinal plants. You can fish the rivers and creeks and lakes nearby. You can do these things. You can start to build this direct relationship. It's harder in the city, no doubt, because what a city is a place where nature is destroyed. That's essentially the definition of a city. But it's possible. And I really recommend everyone get started. Once you have gotten started with this, you won't want to stop. Today I found some chanterelles, lobster mushroom. I think I'm going to pick a little bit of Oregon grape, the branches of Oregon grape root, and little cedar boughs, and boil those up in the house. That's a really potent sort of antiviral, antibacterial mist that you can fill your house with. I just sort of boil it in there. The smell permeates the house. It smells incredible. Traditionally, a lot of the indigenous peoples around this area would use cedar for bedding for one reason among others, because it's got this antimicrobial, antiviral thing. It literally helps you keep healthy to just be around this plant, to be in its presence. And, so I'm going to do that, and we'll see. You might stumble across some other friends and relatives out here and see who we find. Thank you.